Welcome to the Jake Brown podcast. My guest today is a very good friend of mine. He's a fellow boxer, shout out Brick 3 Boxing. He also does jujitsu. We coach CrossFit together at CrossFit Olympia. He's got over 2 decades working as a firefighter. And probably more important than all of that, he's one hell of a family man. What brings him here today, he is going to teach me and all of my listeners about the importance of breathing techniques, how they can help us, how maybe what we're doing is hindering our performances from an athletic standpoint, how better breathing techniques can help manage our stress. I think this is going to be a great episode for all of us to improve our day to day lives. Remember, the Jake Brown podcast can be found on Spotify, on iTunes, on Amazon Music, YouTube, and all episodes are also posted on Twitter at Jake Brown Pod. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Chris Barney.
Now, if any of you sons of bitches got anything else to say, now's the fucking time!
Oh, yeah, we're going now.
Okay, we're going.
Yeah,
Cool.
it's fucking go time. It's
go
go
time.
time. Ladies and gentlemen, Chris Barney.
Hi.
See, you can hear the applause.
I know, it's great.
From Molly, my studio audience.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah. I think like probably the most important question that myself and my 7 listeners that are out there are going to have is these breathing techniques that we're going to talk about. Are they going to help me take longer, more fulfilling bong rips?
Most definitely.
Thank you.
That's,
All right.
That's a given.
All
Absolute
right.
given.
Well, that's today's episode.
And we're done.
And we're done.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for having me. No, man, I appreciate you coming on here today. Obviously, we're going to talk a lot about different breathing techniques, stuff like that. How did you get involved in all of this? I don't know, breathing journey.
The breathing journey.
Yeah,
my breathing journey.
Your breathing journey.
So yeah, my breathing journey actually happened by accident, to be completely honest with you. How this kind of worked was, I've always been into fitness. I've always been into exercise, and I've always kind of been into a more holistic approach to these things, and so I've always known that breathing was important, but I've never really known what that means. Like we hear it all the time. Focus on your breathing. You're like, oh, okay, like what am I supposed to do? And so really how I got introduced to this was by accident. I worked for the fire department, and I was actually supposed to be in Portland taking a class on heavy vehicle extrication and stabilization. And my training chief at the time came to me and he's like, "Hey, there's this class in New York. It's called a Thought Leaders Retreat." And he's like, "I think this was right up your alley, and I'd like to send you to this." And me being super intelligent, I didn't even know what a thought leaders retreat was. It took me like the whole time, like the whole flight to New York to even process what that was. But I was like, hey, I'm going to New York. I've never been. Like, this will be an awesome experience. I was set up in a brownstone in Brooklyn, which is where the class was. And like with that, I mean, we're talking like Brooklyn, like the end of the block was the Biggie Smalls Memorial, like, so it's,
I think I saw that picture
Yeah,
of yours on
yep.
your Instagram.
Yep, that was on my Instagram.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
that's where I was at in Brooklyn. And I didn't really know what I was getting into, and it was this group called Leadership Under Fire. And a big shout out to them. They're kind of just leading the way when it comes to talking about leadership, when they're talking about human performance. And that's kind of what this was about, was asking the question, what about the person? So the human performance aspect of jobs like the fire service, first responders, military, that kind of stuff.
Is it geared more toward like high stress environments?
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that kind of thing.
High stress, high consequence.
Kind of to get your level of stress back down if something happens or something's going to happen, and you're keeping yourself calm.
Totally. It's one of these things where we talk about these high stress environments, but we never, we have training and we have tactics and we have all these things, but we never really ask the question, what about the person, right? Like, how does the person respond in these environments? So this was a kind of a deeper dive into like the psychology and physiology of people and how they operate under stress.
Mhm.
And one of the days we actually went to one of the guys owns a gym in Staten Island. So we went out to Staten Island. We did the first half of the day doing all this like myofascial release, that kind of stuff. And then the second half of the day, we got introduced to a gal named Lisa Vranich, Dr. Lisa Vranich. And she has written a couple books on breathing. And she gave us this super in depth lecture on breathing, breath work, and the benefits and how this can really help first responders, not just from a physical standpoint, but also from like a psychological standpoint. Like, how can we manage, one thing we call like arousal control, like in the moment, that stress, like how do we lower ourselves down so that we're not at like an 8 or so we show
Yeah,
up at like a
yeah.
6
Yeah,
in the
yeah, yeah.
moment, and recognizing those things. And we'll get into that a little bit later, but it was super eye-opening for me. We did a bunch of breathing techniques. We did a breathing IQ score, which I just did on you earlier. And
Is
mine was horrible. Like, I think mine was in the 60s or 50s, like a 50 percentile from my breathing IQ score. And we took yours, and yours was a 78. That was actually like, I was stoked to see that because that's a pretty good starting point.
well, I was a C student through high school and
Hey,
college, so I've just maintained that.
keep it going. So yeah, that was my first introduction to kind of actual true breath work with the breathing coach. And Belisa is a clinical psychologist who got into to breathing, and that's kind of what she teaches. And so I was like, man, this was awesome. And the whole thing, like the whole encounter with her and the class, like completely changed my perspective on human performance as it relates to like tactical athletes or just high stress athletes. And really there's this other concept that goes, the human first, the professional or athlete second. So these are all concepts that we apply to us as people, and they're going to make us better athletes. They're going to make us better professionals,
Mhm.
but they're also going to make us better humans, like better just functioning people.
And I don't think people should get fixated on, oh, this is just for athletes
No.
or this is just for first responders. Like, this is whatever you do in your life that may or may not cause you stress, that is still stress for you.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
these techniques, that we're going to talk about, they can help that stress as well. You don't have to be some NFL player or someone in the NBA to have stress.
Right.
So these work across the board.
Yeah.
No matter what you're doing in your life, this is the kind of thing that can help you
Yeah,
alleviate some of that
exactly.
stress.
We all have stressors, and this isn't a comparison of my stress is more than yours. This is
Mhm.
your stress is your stress, and that's your stress. I
Yeah.
mean, that's real to you, and that's your thing, and it's all different. And yeah, so come back home from all this, and it really kind of had an impact on me, and I thought about it, practice it. And one day, one of the guys, coincidentally in my class in New York, one of the head psychologists for Department of Corrections was in Washington State, was in that class, and he actually works like 3 blocks from my station that I was stationed at, which was just a weird coincidence.
Small world.
Super small
And
world.
you guys meet in New York of all
And we
places,
meet in New York in a brownstone in Brooklyn.
right?
And one day he knocks on the door at the station, and he comes in. He's like, "Hey, I'm bringing somebody from Leadership Under Fire to teach a class." This was the beginning of COVID at this point.
Okay.
He's like, "We had somebody back out because of COVID. I have an extra spot. Do you want it?" And I had no idea what the class was going to be about. I just was like, "Oh, it's one of Leadership Under Fire cadre. Like, I'm in. Like, I got the time off. I'll be there." And so I show up, and it was Belisa, and she was teaching an instructor's course for the breathing class, which is a company she owns. And so we were getting certified as breathing instructors in this class. And so complete happenstance.
Well,
And
yeah. Yeah.
when I walked in, I saw Belisa, and she remembered me. And from then, like, Belisa and I have formed a relationship, and I've done a lot more work with her. I've become one of her instructors, and we collaborate on things now and that kind of stuff. And so we've really been able. She's kind of a mentor of mine in this whole thing. Not kind of, she is a mentor of
Yeah.
mine
Yeah.
in this. And so yeah, so that's kind of how I got started in this
It's
whole
kind of just
thing.
taken off for you.
It has. It has. It's provided a lot of opportunities because I believe in this. I think this is important, not just for people, but for the first responder community
Yeah.
and in a whole. I mean, we're tactical athletes, and we're people, and we deal in high stress situations,
Yeah.
and the decisions that we make in those situations can affect us, our crew, or citizens. And so we need to be the best version of ourselves possible.
Yeah.
And this I believe is a piece of
I remember uh, you do coach CrossFit.
Yeah.
I also coach as well. Shout out CrossFit Olympia. I think you are the emergency coach, and I am
Yeah.
the emergency to the emergency coach.
Right.
I constantly am demoting myself.
Right.
But I remember, and this has been now a couple years, and it was about
Mhm,
the time that you started doing all that.
mhm.
I remember I came into the noon class and you were coaching, and before we got started, you had talked about this, and you had said, I want to talk more about breathing, and there will be seminars and blah blah blah. You
Mhm.
just kind of
Yeah.
put the put the feelers out there if people were interested. But
Planted
one
some
thing,
seeds.
yeah, yeah, and one thing that I remembered you mentioned was that most people in either a stressful environment or even in in the athletic arena, they tend to breathe up and they don't breathe out.
Yeah.
And I didn't really think about that in the moment. And it wasn't until maybe a few days later, it was kind of in my head. And ever since then, I've been consciously trying to work on, as part of my recovery, when I'm either mid workout or sparring and boxing,
Mhm.
when we only have a very very short amount of time
Yes.
to try to recover, is to not breathe up through my shoulders but to breathe out through my belly, through my diaphragm,
Yes.
and get the air in that way. And I
Correct. Yeah.
find that initially it's hard when you're not used to it, you know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Oh,
You
totally.
feel like you're suffocating almost. But as you get a little better at it, a little more comfortable, and by no means am I some pro because I still forget every now and then,
Sure.
it makes such a huge difference.
Yeah.
And I find that if I'm insanely exhausted, within 30 seconds of deep belly breathing, I'm almost back to my
Mhm.
baseline.
Yeah. Taking recovery breaths.
Yeah,
Yep.
big, deep recovery breaths.
Mhm.
And you said another thing, and this is a total kind of probably generational thing, the way that we grew up as kids playing sports,
Yeah.
where, oh, get your hands off your knees, you
Right.
fucking pussies, like
Right.
don't do that kind of
Right.
thing. When in reality, you've taken all the stress off your diaphragm and your core,
Yeah.
and you're allowing yourself to actually breathe deeper breaths, and
Exactly.
you're recovering quicker. So it's almost counterproductive to stand up and act tough.
Right.
You're actually just hindering yourself. Like,
Exactly.
you got to take that stress off of your core a little bit and allow yourself to get the oxygen
Yeah. So that comes to a couple things here, right? So what we're talking about is using our diaphragm, and our diaphragm, we actually have about 10 to 15 pounds of breathing muscles, and the majority of it is our diaphragm. And it kind of is this underrated muscle that we don't talk about enough. And when we see it in like anatomy books, it's like this little line,
in.
but really it's like this giant skirt steak, and it's a muscle. And just like any other muscle, it needs to be exercised, right? Like we can't get those big biceps without exercising the biceps and working against resistance. It's the same thing with a diaphragm. We can't strengthen that without working against resistance. But the other thing is that's actually part of our core and our stabilization muscles. So whenever we're doing that, hands on the head to recover, we're doing a couple things when we do that. We're narrowing our rib cage
Mhm.
because of the way that our arms are,
Bingo.
and we are engaging our core to stabilize us. So we're actually using part of our diaphragm and our stabilizing muscles for that. So we're not able to take these big diaphragmatic breaths.
Mhm.
But yeah, but before we get into that, it's like one of these things that like most of us kind of we don't breathe what's called anatomically correct. And one thing that anybody listening can do is if we just sit up straight in our chair, we put our right hand on our chest and our left hand on our belly, and we take a big deep breath in through our nose, hold it for just a quick second, and then a big exhale. So it's
We're actually doing this right now, by
yeah.
the way.
And what you want to notice is if your right hand moved, you're doing what we call a horizontal breath, meaning your chest is coming up. Really, what we should be looking at is our right hand should be staying still, and our left hand should almost be going out. It's completely counterintuitive to everything culture tells us about, like, you know, our
Yeah.
bellies and all this stuff.
Yeah.
So this is the difference between what we call horizontal breathing and vertical breathing. Vertical breathing is incongruent with kind of our anatomy. And we have to use our accessory muscles in order to do that. So we're actually using like a lot of our intercostals, using our shoulders, and we're pulling up on our chest when we do that, which is actually narrowing our rib cage space. We're not
Mhm.
allowing those lungs. and we're not allowing that diaphragm to do its thing. We're not allowing it to fully like expand out, and then so that we can take that big deep breath.
Which is why your shoulders feel fatigued when you're exhausted and you're
Exactly.
heavy panting,
Yeah,
breathing,
you're
trying to recover. Like it seems weird that your shoulders are going to be tired when you're
right.
out of breath, but that's why.
That's one of the reasons for sure. It's because we're using these accessory muscles in order to draw in air versus using the main breathing muscle, which is our diaphragm, to allow that air to go into our lungs. And so when we're breathing congruous or congruent, when we're breathing correct, our diaphragm, our belly should be coming out. And so this is one of those things that James Nestor he talks a lot about. Like he says, that humans are the worst breathers in the animal kingdom, and this kind of has started with us. When we're babies, we're awesome breathers. If you ever notice little babies, their little bellies are just like going
Yeah.
up and down, right? They are like perfect belly breathers as babies, and as they get older, it's about the age of 5 that we actually start to pick up these bad habits and start to lose it.
What do you think causes that?
So there's a few things. One of the things is about 5 is when we start going to school. We're sitting more, right? So we have bad posture. We're sitting down.
Got it. School's bad. Don't
Right.
send your kids to school.
Right.
What's next?
Moral of the story. No, kids are sitting down. So we have bad posture. We're hunched over, shoulders up. We're not allowing for the diaphragmatic extension. The other thing is we're starting to mimic adults at about 5. And, if you remember going to the doctor and the doctor put the stethoscope up here and tell you to take a big deep breath.
Yeah.
Yeah. Our lungs aren't up here.
Yeah.
Our lungs are actually down here. And so we start to mimic adults. And most people that you see when you ask them to take a big deep breath, what do? They go, their head goes up, nose goes up, shoulders goes up, the whole thing.
Yeah.
Their midsection collapses. Um, and that's just kind of what we've grown accustomed to. The other piece of this is we start becoming body conscious at around 5. You see the little kid with the little Buddha belly, and all of a sudden, the next thing you know, kids poking at the Buddha belly, and now kids start getting conscious of their body, and so we start bracing at about that age. And that bracing, we start sucking in our stomach because that's what society tells us, right? We got to have this flat 6-pack abs.
Yeah.
I mean, I do, of course.
Well,
But,
yeah,
I mean,
of
obviously.
course.
But
Obviously. I mean, we do CrossFit,
I mean,
so
of
obviously
course.
we're super ripped.
but so like that's the thing, right? So they start bracing, and we start doing that for the rest of our lives. We start bracing as this like self-conscious thing, so we're not allowing that full belly extension, that full diaphragmatic um, extension, and allowing that belly to come out because we don't want to get made fun of for having a gut. And so that's one thing we got to kind of lose is this whole idea that um, you know that this flat stomach means that we're healthy all the time.
It doesn't necessarily equate.
No, it doesn't necessarily equate. It's not a measurement of health as far as if somebody's belly breathing and their belly comes out. That's not somebody that's not healthy. You know what I mean? That's actually healthy breathing.
Yeah.
So those are some of the reasons why we start to lose that. And so then over time we just have those habits, and there's a lot of things that start to come from it. By not proper breathing, we can have digestive issues. We can start getting back pain, like weird back pain, and not just from us being old and trying to
Yeah.
keep up with all the young CrossFit kids and
Right.
boxing kids. Gosh, speaking of that, man, the other day I boxed in the morning and I went to jujitsu in the evening, right? And God, we were shooting these single legs, and by the end of the by the end of class, man, I felt my age, dude. Like
Oh,
I went to go take a shot on this kid, and I was like, could barely get down. And I was like, I think it's just time for me to go home. Like, I think I'm good.
It's a daily thing with
Oh
me.
man,
Every day when I get out of bed, it's something.
yeah,
It's always the guaranteed both my ankles. I've broken one and dislocated the other. I can't walk normal for about my first 20 steps. Uh, so by the time I get to the kitchen, usually both ankles are kind of working the way they should be.
You've evened out a little bit.
I've evened out. I don't. Yeah, I don't walk like I'm on stilts or anything. But yeah, it is. I do notice sometimes I have this weird back pain, and I now that you say that, I do wonder if it's because I breathe like shit most of the time, even when I'm consciously. I think I'm only really conscious about my breathing when I'm in a fitness environment and
Sure.
I'm trying to recover.
Sure.
Outside of that, it's just so subconscious, and I just breathe the way I guess I've always breathed since I was 5.
Yeah.
That at my age, I don't think about that has to carry over into all aspects of my life. It
Yeah.
can't just be in the athletic arena.
Right. And
So,
what I found too is focusing on my breathing outside of the athletic arena dramatically improves it inside the arena. I mean, obviously, right?
yeah.
And not even like, not even having to do like serious focus work, but I mean, practice diaphragmatic breathing when I'm in the line at the grocery store, just
Mhm.
focusing on my breathing, I probably look like a weirdo, but whatever.
Yeah.
Like, I mean,
No, I
probably
get it.
nobody notices, but it's one of those things that like,
Everybody's on their phone anyway. No
yeah,
one pays
exactly.
attention.
Right. Nobody looks at that. But I mean, that's the key, right? Is here's the other thing too, is these muscles, like these breathing muscles, we don't work them out in sport. So like, I can't have better breathing muscles just by running or
Mhm.
just by doing whatever. Um, I need to actually be intentional about working those muscles. And when I'm intentional about working those muscles, it's kind of it makes the engine better, I
Yeah.
guess, basically the analogy. It's like you, the car's going to look the same on the outside,
Yeah.
but you're tuning up under the hood,
It's a
right?
sleeper car.
Yeah, exactly. It's a
Yeah.
sleeper car.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And so doing that work outside is really what's going to improve the performance inside sport and all the other things above. You'll go back to that diaphragmatic breathing unconsciously, or subconsciously. You'll just like go right back to it and
Mhm.
like just all those things. But it needs to be trained separate from sport. And it's one of those things where people are like, oh, but I'm getting better at running and I breathe better. It's like, yeah, your VO2 max is getting better and you're getting more used to it. But VO2 max and actually like your breathing muscles and like a measurement of like, your exhalation using spirometry and all that kind of stuff, your breathing IQ scores, they're
Mhm.
not necessarily going to get better running. You have to work on those
Yeah.
things.
I
So
mean, it's a muscle like any other muscle,
like
and
any
the
other
muscle
muscle.
has to be trained, and you have to develop that muscle memory.
Yep,
And once you do, it becomes second nature.
for sure.
But with obviously with most of us, it's going to be undoing years, if not decades, of bad
Yeah,
habits,
yeah,
and that's why I find all this very interesting. Um, I When I'm conscious about it, I see the benefits.
right.
I just have to be better about being conscious in all aspects of my life, not
Right.
just in between getting punched in the face.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
who actually uh, has a demographic of people that have a lot of knowledge about this and a lot of experience. You will probably never guess.
I won't guess.
Singers.
Yes, actually, yes. Singers and
Yeah.
wind instrument
Yep.
players. Yep. They
And
are amazing diaphragmatic
yeah,
breathers and very good at controlling the diaphragm.
I
Yes.
actually sang choir for years.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
How
Well, I
about, how
got
about a quick
into
tune?
it. Yeah, I got into it when I was a senior in high school, and I just really enjoyed it. So I did it all through college. I sang in our concert
Man,
choir.
I learned something new about you.
Yeah, but my choir instructor, Solvi Holmquist, she was huge on breathing and was constantly preaching over and over and over. Breathe through your stomach, not through
Hmm.
your chest.
Yeah.
You know,
Yep.
deep belly breaths. You have to work the diaphragm. And
Hmm.
at that point, this is the mid to late '90s. I'm like,
Right.
what the fuck is a diaphragm?
Right.
Isn't that something chicks use? Like I had, I didn't know what the hell that is.
Right.
But once it was explained, I was like, oh, okay, like that makes sense. And it works.
Yeah.
And we trained it daily where
Hmm.
we would do these different, I mean, essentially singing drills to purposely kind of overload the diaphragm or from like a stress standpoint to really work it.
You're working it out.
Oh, and we would
Yeah.
leave there. I would be fucking exhausted
Yeah.
when we walked out of there.
Yep.
But the proof was in the pudding. I could carry notes longer.
Hmm.
It was easier for me to get deep breaths. Then, you're quicker. You're not having to stagger notes and
Hmm.
stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like it works. But
Yeah. 100%.
then you graduate and you forget about it and you go do other shit. And
Right.
fast forward 20 years, here we are.
And here we are. No, you're absolutely right. Like singers, wind instrument players, they're really good at using that
Yeah,
diaphragm, and yeah, we can learn a lot from them, for sure,
yeah, yeah.
for sure.
Who would have thought?
I know, right? Super crazy. Um, yeah. So I mean, we kind of talk about the vertical breathing, horizontal breathing, working out, but a couple other things like recovery. We talked about recovery earlier, and I kind of break recovery down into three different stages. And those three different things are kind of inner event recovery, like kind of like we're talking about between rounds, right?
Mhm.
Like between rounds of boxing, between rounds jujitsu. I think about this from a tactical athlete standpoint too. This is like the work in between the work,
Yeah.
and whenever you have that quick second to recover, we need to use, that's recovery, a time to recover. And that's that whole thing of like, taking that pressure off your diaphragm, getting in either a tripod position or trying something that you can take stress off your abdomen, who are really good at this. And I hate to give them credit for it, but cyclists, like road cyclists, like
They don't
I know,
even use
but I
engines.
know, right? Nerds. No, but one thing that they teach them is when they're in their, when they're on the bike, is to relax that belly and kind of arch the back and relax the belly. And so they have very little pressure on their core.
Mm,
And so they're able to sustain that breathing better, longer, because they're not using that as a primary stabilizer. So they're actually really good at that. But that's one of the goals of this inner event, like taking that time to recover. And one thing I like to do to help train this is I have a heavy bag in the garage, and sometimes what I'll do is I'll go out and do rounds, and I'll try to see how high I can get my heart rate during a round. So I'll try to end a round at like a 170, 180 heart rate,
mhm.
and during that 30-second to a minute rest, depending on what my rest interval is, sometimes I'll do it if I do a 3-minute round. Sometimes I'll cheat it to a minute rest
Yeah.
versus like the 30 seconds. Probably should be doing, but I'll see how low the game is. I try to see how low I can get my heart rate
Yeah.
within that 1 minute period. And I've gone from 180 to 90 before, and
You're cutting it in half.
cutting it in half. And if you imagine how ready to go that next round you are,
Yeah.
if you're starting at a heart rate under 100
Yeah.
versus like, you know, starting back up at a heart rate at 140. I mean, it's just like CrossFit, right? Once we redline, we're redline, and
Yeah.
trying to come back down from that
Yep.
is absolutely miserable.
It's brutal. And
Yeah.
I find that if I am conscious about it, like with the every minute on the minute things,
Hmm.
and you may only have anywhere from 20 to 40 seconds depending on what the
Yeah.
movement is to get rest. And if I'm consciously just taking as many deep belly breaths as I can,
Hmm.
I know that from past experience prior to doing that, I'm in a better position definitely to start that next round.
Yeah.
And it's just easier to get through the workout as a whole. I
Hmm.
don't feel as fucking shitty.
The next trick is to try to make those not just belly breaths, but nasal belly breaths rather than
Okay,
breathing through the mouth.
well,
So that's the next trick.
do
But it takes some time. That
is
takes some
there is
time.
there a factor for like having broken your nose before and not gotten it
I mean, all
fixed?
that stuff it does play a part.
It does play.
You have
So what
septum deviations, that kind of stuff.
yeah, what is the kind of the I don't know, the I can't think of the word I'm trying to say. Like how big of a role do like deviated septums play in that?
They do play a role. That dives a little bit more into the science and like I'm familiar with. Like
Yeah.
I'd be making something up.
Yeah.
I do know in James Nestor's book Breathe,
Mhm.
he talks about that, and he talks the two books. Like I'll just shout out here for a couple books
Yeah, yeah.
that I think are great companions. Is James Nestor's book Breathe,
Okay.
and then Belisa Vranich's book Breathing for Warriors. And I
Okay.
think these are great companions because Breathing for Warriors is a really good like reference book. I mean, it talks about breathing exercises and it goes through and demonstrates breathing exercises and talks about it's really good reference for that. James Nestor really talks about dives into the science behind nasal breathing versus mouth breathing and what happens at a cellular level with breathing. And so I feel like these two books work really good in conjunction with each other
Yeah, yeah.
because Lisa's really, really dives in, and she knows a lot. She knows a ton of the science, but the book Breathing for Warriors really dives into the mechanics, where Nestor dives into the science.
Gotcha.
And so he does talk about deviated septums in there. It's just been a while since I've dove into that. So
I'll take pictures of those book covers and I'll put them on Twitter on the right. I'll post the episode on Twitter, but I'll put pictures of those two books so if
yeah,
people want to
awesome.
go there and
Yeah,
see them.
great, cool. So so we talk about like kind of the inner event recovery, right? Like how important it is, like in between, in between sets, in between rounds, in between kind of in the tactical world, like I call it the work between the work, and for the fire service, I could be, you know, pulling a hose line to the front door, and now I'm waiting to make entry. I'm going to use that wait period, focus on my breathing, get my heart rate down so that I can make entry, that kind of stuff, and it'll just sustain my ability to work in these high stress environments for longer, recover faster, like we were talking about, uh, you're starting rounds fresher. When I'm
Yeah.
boxing, I'm starting a fresher round. So super important. The next piece that I consider is like active recovery, right? And so this is after we're done working out, we need to kind of cool our body down and recover. And this is a part that I'm really bad at warming up, and I'm really bad at cooling down.
Yeah, me
Like
too.
it's just one of those things that I need to be better about, especially the older I get, the more I feel like I
Yep.
should probably spend some time warming up. Like I
Yeah.
can't go from 0 to 100 anymore.
Well, that's how you get hurt.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things. It's how
Mhm.
and I don't know if the like all this breathing stuff ties in, and maybe you don't know. I find if I don't warm up and we do something real heavy cardio based and the temperature's kind of cold,
Yeah.
it almost like it shocks my lungs.
Sure.
And I will have like this twinge in my throat for hours after the
Right.
workout that like won't go away. And almost like I have this cough.
That, like
And
cardio cough.
yeah, and I
Yeah.
don't and
Yeah.
it doesn't really happen when it's hot out, but if
Mhm.
the temperature's cooler and I'm out of the gate too hot and I didn't warm up good enough, my lungs, they're toast
Well, I
for
think
what feels like for hours.
yeah, and I think a lot of it is you're going from like again, we'll go back to the car analogy, right? Like
Mhm.
you always kind of want to warm up the engine before you hit the accelerator, and it's the same kind of
Yeah.
thing. We kind of need to warm up that before we start, or we're gonna break something. We need to warm it up. We need to get it used to the temperature. We need to slowly raise that temperature up,
Yeah.
and the whole kind of thing. Like we need to slowly acclimate ourselves to it.
But here's the problem. Here's the problem. Is that people in your profession, firefighters, cops,
Mhm.
especially cops, you know, my girlfriend's a flight nurse. You guys go from nothing to an absolute shit show in a matter of minutes,
Yeah.
and you don't have that time to get
Right.
warmed up.
Right.
And I almost feel like it's even more important to be maybe constantly doing these kinds of, either
Mhm.
breathing exercises or whatnot. And I'm not saying, you just sit around and are constantly
All
doing
day
stuff
long.
your entire 24-hour
Right.
shift.
Right.
But, you know, it beats the alternative, which is getting that lung shock because you've done nothing or you just woke up from sleeping. It's
Mhm.
3, 4 in the morning, and
Yeah.
you get toned out and it's just you go from nothing to everything
So
immediately,
yeah, that kind of dives into another realm of this. Really, when we start talking about that kind of activity, that's the reason why it's so important to stay in shape in these professions, is
Thank you.
because this
Dude, there is nothing more infuriating
oh, I know.
than seeing some fat fucking cop spill out of a patrol car. And I've not talked about my past on this podcast at all. I have probably glazed over 10 years of my life talking about, what I've done work-wise, but I will say I used to be a cop. I was a cop for a decade, and regardless of how good or bad of a cop you are, the one thing that you can always control
Right.
is your level of fitness.
Yes.
And seeing so many cops completely neglected to
It's the
the
same
point
thing in the fire
to the
service.
point
We
that
have that
it's an
problem too.
officer safety issue,
Yeah.
And now you're not only putting yourself at risk, you're putting the other cops who then have to bail your ass out if something bad happens because you aren't physically capable of maintaining even the most basic level of stress management from
Right.
a physical aspect,
Right.
and it drives me absolutely nuts,
Yeah.
honestly. In between you and me, it makes me want to
Stays right here.
it makes me want to throw a rock at a patrol car when they drive by when I know it's a fat one and then just run. I mean, I would never do that.
Again.
Again. But
No.
it's just like it drives me. It's like have some pride in
Well,
yourself, you know?
for me, it's one of those things too, where it's like, I kind of made a commitment. This was going to be my profession,
Yeah.
right? And so I made a commitment not just to the people that I serve, but to the people that I work with and work for.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be the weak link. And also the older I get, the more I'm like, I'm not going to let any of these 20-something-year-olds outwork me.
No,
Like they're
it's
going to have to work
exactly.
for every bit of it, because
Exactly.
and I take pride in that. And I wish that more folks that were in these professions would do that. It's kind of a stain on the community. But more so than that, I mean, really what we're talking about here
Agreed.
is health, right? And
Yeah.
like, imagine if you have somebody who's out of shape, doesn't exercise. Now that tone goes off at 3 in the morning, and they're going from 0 to 100. We're talking about the motor of the engine, right? We
Yep.
are going to break something.
Yep.
And that's why
Yep.
we have such a high incidence of cardiac related issues in these professions, is because poor stress management, poor exercise,
Hmm.
and high stress.
Yeah.
And so it's just a recipe for disaster. And so if we can start
Yeah.
controlling bits and pieces of this, breathing and breath work is a great way to control bits and pieces of this.
And it's such a basic level, it's you don't have to, you don't need a prescription for it.
Right,
It doesn't
exactly.
cost you anything.
No.
There's no therapy involved with
Nope.
this. No one's going to know your deepest darkest
Right.
secrets.
Right.
Like, this is something that when you're sitting around at the station eating chili watching
Hmm.
football on a Sunday,
Hmm.
you can be practicing your breathing.
Yeah, and nobody would even
Like,
notice.
it's free. Like,
It's
this is free.
100% free.
Yeah, exactly. And
100%
this
free.
goes for fucking doctors. This goes for
Hmm.
nurses, people, loggers who
Yep.
work in the woods.
Yeah,
Like, this
anything.
is something that everyone can be doing that's going to benefit your life in a positive way.
Yep, 100%.
So,
100%.
yeah. Yeah.
So
All right. I'm off my soapbox.
that's all right.
I'm
We
talking
kind of went on
about
a little tangent here, but
fat
but
first
along those
responders.
lines, like along the same lines. So here's the thing that I want to kind of stress about active recovery, and this is kind of like our cooling down stage, right?
Mhm.
Like anytime that we get our heart rate up over about 60% of our max heart rate, we're starting to release cortisol into our system, and so it's a stress hormone, right? And so our sympathetic nervous system, was developed to protect us from the saber-tooth tiger,
Mhm.
right? And it's that whole fight or flight, right?
Yeah.
Sympathetic, parasympathetic, that fight or flight response. Um, Society has changed and evolved, right? We're not being hunted by the saber-tooth tiger anymore, but our autonomic nervous system hasn't really changed with society. So
Mhm.
it doesn't really differentiate between a CrossFit workout, a boxing workout, running from a saber-tooth tiger, um, you know,
10
uh,
minutes of CPR on
10
someone.
minutes CPR. It's stress to the body, right?
Yeah.
So our heart rate goes up, cortisol gets flushed into our system. And this happens with working out too, which is one of those, it just happens. It's a
Yeah.
normal thing. And so really, when we're talking about active recovery, we want to do something that keeps our heart rate under about 40% of our max heart rate. And so having a breathwork routine, so coming back from a high stress call, or coming back from uh, at the end of boxing, at the end of the session, at the end of a good CrossFit workout, 10 minutes,
Mhm.
on the floor, 10 to 20. 20 is about optimal,
Yeah.
but of maybe some light stretching, some breath work. That's a great time to get the breath work in. And not only are we helping work our diaphragm, we're focusing on the mechanics of good breathing, but now we're blowing off a lot of that. We're detoxifying
Mhm.
through the breath work as well. So we're getting rid of a lot of this stuff as well.
Yeah.
And so it's just a great idea to do after some hard workouts,
Yeah.
this active recovery.
I
So
found that doing yoga,
mhm,
um, after my hip surgery, I did a lot of yoga to try to get my mobility back.
sure.
And the hardest thing about yoga, and I was, brand new, had never done it, um, was the whole breathing aspect,
Mhm.
because you're so tense when you're holding all these
Yeah.
weird positions that if let's say I'm in like the downward dog or whatever, okay, if my upper body is loaded and I'm, flexing my arms, I'm flexing my shoulders, I'm flexing my chest, I can't breathe the way that I would want to normally breathe.
That horizontal or
I can't
that vertical breathing.
vertical
Yeah,
breathe like
vertical
that.
breathing. Yeah.
And I found that it would force me, if I wanted to hold that pose longer, or any pose, to start breathing through my stomach more.
Yeah.
And it allowed me, it's almost like it it loosened my body,
Hmm.
like it allowed me to then get a little further
Yep.
on a twisting pose or
Sure.
whatever that I normally couldn't because vertically breathing, I would be too tense,
Right.
you know?
So one thing that we call that the ability to 360 breathe, right? So
Hmm.
what it is I can be in a position, but because I'm getting better control of my diaphragm, I can breathe in different parts of my abdomen and into my back. I can do what's called back breathing. I can do all these different things because I've been learning to control my diaphragm. And that's what you're doing in that position. It's
Yeah.
forcing you forcing you
You can
to.
spot
I know
that.
I'm just gonna rip wires out. And
It's
this is
all
why I
good.
can't own nice
I
things.
know.
But it forces you into these positions where you have to use your
Yeah.
diaphragm, and so it forces us out of those bad habits and into good habits. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's a great point.
No, it's we all have a lot of bad habits for
Oh
sure.
yeah, for sure, for sure. The last one that I kind of want to touch on as far as recovery is this idea of like meditation recovery
Mhm.
and using it to kind of as some like grounding techniques. And it's tough. I think meditation is one of these things that kind of, it sometimes can have a really like woo woo type. People are like, hey, we're gonna go meditate. They're like, yeah, yeah, I'm
It
not
gets
doing
a
that.
bad
Like,
rap.
yeah, it gets a bad rap, but it doesn't have to have a bad rap. So one thing they actually found with meditation was people that had a normal meditation routine as part of their just routine. And I'm not talking like daily meditation, like 3 to 4 times a week. They actually had an increase of gray matter in their brain. And why that's significant and important is
What is gray matter?
so gray matter. Why that's important is what they found is Alzheimer's and dementia. In Alzheimer's and dementia patients, there is an atrophy of gray matter in the brain, and so they either have reduced amounts or it starts to atrophy, it starts to harden. And so that has been correlated to Alzheimer's and dementia. And so what they've been showing through meditation is there's actually an increase in gray matter and it keeps its elasticity. So less Alzheimer's and dementia in folks that actually have an active meditation kind of routine. And um, so super kind of important. And there's a lot of different ways people can meditate. Meditation, there isn't like just like, clear your mind and that
Yeah.
is super difficult. In fact, there's a technique that Belisa taught us that I really like, and it's called an active meditation. And the first time I did this was back in New York, and I was like, okay, this is going to be interesting because what we did was we got like 12 minutes worth of heavy metal songs, basically, and we're on the ground and we're doing this breathing routine where it's like a double inhale with a long exhale almost to the point of hyperventilation. So you are like over oxygenating your system, but you're doing some really heavy breathing
Yeah.
to loud metal music. And at the end of it,
I'm in.
yeah, I know, right? Like
So far, I'm
let's
in.
do
Unless the
this.
music sucks, but
Yeah, right. And then at the end we switch that to a calmer music, and then we go back to this like normal relaxed breathing pattern. And I thought I was on the floor for 10 minutes, right? Like I was like, oh, that was a nice little rest.
yeah.
Look at the clock. I was there for 40 minutes, had no clue. Like I was completely in another world. I was so relaxed, so calm. And by the end of that, I felt so good.
Yeah.
It was just like, oh man, this is great. Like,
I
and
think people's hardest or maybe biggest hang up or issue with meditation, and I've meditated before. We are so addicted to these
yeah,
fucking phones
right.
that are glued to our person
Yeah,
constantly
yeah,
that people have such a hard time disconnecting
yeah,
and just putting the phone away. And I don't know
100%,
if they're
man.
just terrified to be alone with their own
Mhm.
thoughts. Sometimes you just got to embrace that shit
Right,
and just let the
right.
demons fucking
Yeah,
talk.
right.
But, the more you can just disconnect and just shut your eyes,
Mhm.
whether you're doing the crazy breathing or
Yeah,
not,
yeah,
you're doing the thing at that point.
right.
And eventually you can organize your thoughts and
Yeah,
you can allow
exactly.
yourself to, breathe more consistent or
Mhm.
more regulated
Well,
and
and that's one thing too that like what I found with meditation is it's tough, right? Because the goal is to try to be as clear minded as possible.
mhm,
But who the hell can do that? Like,
nobody.
right? Like, there's probably
Babies, that's it.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know how many web browsers are open in this brain constantly at all times,
Yeah,
and like
no.
trying to get my brain to shut off is next to impossible.
Yeah.
But I notice if I'm going to dedicate, say, 10 minutes that I'm going to dedicate to some meditation time, what I'll do is I'll go back to focusing on my breathing. So I'll be like, okay, I need to rotate my hips. I need to make sure that I'm my diaphragm. So whatever junk is going through my brain, I kind of put that, I kind of ignore that and I focus back on my breathing
Yeah.
technique. So that way it gives me something to ground into
Hmm.
that I can let go of the other things. So
Yeah.
the other things kind of get pushed to the side while I focus on just the grounding and the,
Which is true with any activity
yeah,
that you're focused on doing.
yep,
You know, like
yep,
if I'm doing mechanic work on my motorcycle, I'm more than likely not heavily focused on something else that doesn't have
right.
anything to do with my motorcycle
Yeah,
because I'm going to make a mistake then. You need to
right.
be focused on what it is you're doing.
Yes.
And eventually you just learn to tune everything else out.
Exactly.
But
And I mean, that's like mindfulness, right? Like that's
yeah,
being present in the moment,
exactly.
and
And it
that's
takes practice.
it 100%.
Yeah. It feels chaotic at
Yeah.
first, but eventually, like any activity that you're new to, it gets easier.
Yeah.
But you got
Yeah.
to stick with it.
That's one reason why I've actually really grown to love combat sports
Hmm.
is, I mean, it's a great thing to learn, builds, confidence and gets a skill set. The other thing is you have to be 100% present in the moment.
Exactly.
And I can't be worrying about what happened at work or I'm going to
No,
get punched in the face or I'm going to
exactly.
get choked out at jujitsu,
Yep.
or like I
Yeah.
have to be 100% in that moment,
Yep.
present, focusing on the things that can help me in that moment.
I think
And
hobbies like that in general
yeah,
are good to have,
totally.
and I've talked about this, and I don't know what the
Yeah.
hell
Well, I
episode
think
it
riding
was, but
motorcycles,
yeah,
like another great example,
when I raced
anything,
motorcycle, that was one of, aside from being ridiculously fun,
right?
um, you know, when you're going 160, 170, 180 miles an
Mhm.
hour, you can't think about anything
Right.
except what's coming up,
Right.
because
Right.
in the blink of an eye, you've now traveled 1,000 feet.
Right.
Anything can happen.
Yep.
And on some level, I miss that about road racing.
Hmm.
Um, but boxing has definitely been a good replacement for that. And
Sure.
I enjoy the amount of focus that it
Hmm.
takes to survive
Yeah.
in that ring.
Yeah. Exactly.
You can't think about anything else,
Nope.
you
Nope.
know
You have to be 100% present.
I get
And
punched when I'm thinking 100% about boxing.
mhm.
I couldn't imagine having my attention diverted,
Right.
you know?
Right.
Like
Well,
what
I think that's just a good life thing in general. I think people need, I mean, to deviate from the breathing talk here for a second
yeah.
and just or to talk about like what people need in their lives. You talk about the phones being these great distractors in our lives and it's nothing but noise. I mean, a lot of it, I mean, it's a great way to communicate with people and that kind of stuff, but 99% noise,
It is.
and I think we've lost that ability to check out.
Yeah.
And so I think people need something to check into so
Yeah.
that they can check out. And so whether that's a combat sport, whether that's I mean, it could be
Painting.
anything.
It could
It
be
could be
anything.
anything.
Yeah,
Yeah, it could be
art,
woodwork. It could be
woodwork. Yeah.
pottery, whatever it is, like
Yeah.
something to shut down the distractions, the noise, and
It's
just be present in the moment.
it's so important. I mean, it is, and I think people really, especially in this country, people really take that shit for granted.
Yeah.
And I don't know. We need. I would love to see. I would love to see 60, 100 people showing up for boxing class.
Me too.
Every
Yep.
night, but that will never happen. But
Mhm.
I've said 100 times on here. It doesn't matter what the fuck you do.
Mhm.
Find
Find
something
something to do.
that you can do.
Yep.
That gets you off your phone, that gets you
Mhm.
moving, that gets you out, that's stimulating your brain.
Yep.
It's just like I don't want my dog just sitting around all day, not ever doing anything. We have to
Right.
stimulate their
Yeah,
brains.
exactly.
So I hide her toys from her and I make her find them. We
Right.
take them for walks.
Yep.
We do all kinds of stuff. We stimulate their brains,
Sure.
and we need ours stimulated too.
Yeah.
And
And not by the noise.
not
That's
by
not
the noise.
stimulation.
That's not stimulation.
No.
That's drowning.
Yeah,
That's
that's aggravation.
oh god,
What that is.
ridiculous.
No,
Um,
absolutely.
where were we?
And we digress
Get
again.
off our soapboxes again.
Honestly, I think it's a good time to kind of transition. We can start talking about
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
kind of the mental aspect and the mental focus of breath work. And I kind of I'm a big quote guy. I like quotes because
I like quotes.
I'm too dumb to think of them on my own. So like I like
Yeah.
stealing other people's. And there's a great one by General Mattis, and and it's the most important 6 inches on the battlefield is between your ears.
Mm,
And like I think that's true. That's not just true on the battlefield. That's true in life, right?
yeah.
Like the best tool we have is between our ears.
Mhm.
And so, um, you know, uh, when we start talking about that, we start talking about kind of our autonomic nervous system, right? Like the fight or flight mechanism, which is our sympathetic state, or like parasympathetic state, which is this rest and digest, right? And I used to always think it was like, hey, I'm either sympathetic or I'm parasympathetic, and it's actually not how it works. What it is it's kind of like I'm somewhere on the scale of,
Hmm.
like some days under high stress, I'm more fight or flight. Some days in low stress, I'm more rest or digest, but I'm usually on the
It's not
sliding
either
scale.
or.
No, it's
Yeah,
a
yeah,
sliding scale,
yeah.
you know, and kind of, stress is one of those things that can kind of, whatever that is, whether it's an outside stressor, a physical stressor, psychological stressor, that can make us more, put us more in that sympathetic, like fight or flight stage, and so when we start talking about like managing our stress, the biggest thing to know that stress management is related to heart rate regulation. And so bottom line, like the higher our heart rate, the higher the stress, usually the higher the heart rate,
Yeah.
the more likely we are to make mistakes and to screw things up. And I really talk about this with the first responder community because this is kind of our life, right? Like we show up to something, we get stress, our heart rate raises to match stress. Next thing you know, we can't remember what our name is, and
Yeah.
like, and there's an actual like physiological process that happens. And there's this thing called the inverted U curve of performance. And what this looks like is, I kind of show it to you here, but what this looks like is it's a bell curve, right? So kind of, we'll kind of substitute the word stress with the word arousal. And don't get too excited. What I mean by arousal.
Mm.
What I mean by arousal is going to be any kind of like, it's going to be a stressor. It's going to be either a physical or a psychological stressor, something that's going to get our heart rate up, right? And like in this curve, like, if we're sleeping, that's not a high stress situation, right? So our performance doesn't really have to go up very much. But as demand on our performance increases, as the stress increases, the demand on our performance increases till we get to this like nice little rounded area at the top, which is
Hmm.
what we call our optimal performance zone, right? Which is like, that's like the zone, right? Like anybody that's been any kind of sport or athlete
Yeah.
knows the zone. Like
Yeah.
you're working on autopilot, things are just firing. You're like, baseball players talk about the baseball slowing down.
Yeah. Yep.
I'm sure
Racing,
in racing,
especially,
like everything slows down.
everything gets
Yeah,
slowed
everything gets
until
slowed.
something goes wrong. It
Right.
never it never feels like you're going as fast as you are
Right.
until a mistake is made.
Sure.
And then all that speed catches up with you in a moment and
Oh,
you're
I'm
like, "Oh
sure.
shit." And once you gather yourself and get yourself calm back down, the race then slows back down again
Right.
mentally for you. So yeah, I know
Right.
exactly what you're talking about
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. And so, but then as we add more stress to that, we do what we call falling off the backside of the curve, right? Or we're right of the curve is what we'd call that. And what happens to us on that backside is there's actually like a physiological response that happens to us. We actually witness this in CrossFit sometimes when we have those. CrossFit is really good at this. Like, how many times are you in like in a hard workout that you remember what song's on, or even hear the music that's playing?
Yeah, not too.
Or
I think beats, but like the song itself,
yeah, you
no
kind of
idea.
lose track, right?
Yeah,
Or my favorite is, did I just do this 3 times or did I have to do it 4 times? Like I
yeah,
can't even count to four right now.
yeah.
Like that's an example of stress in our heart rate, like our inability to catch up with it, right? And
Mhm.
it's a very safe example because there
Yeah,
isn't a lot of risk involved
yeah,
at that point. But now translate that to a a high stakes, high risk situation.
yeah,
So, law enforcement,
yep,
firefighter, military community,
yeah,
like bad things can happen.
yeah,
And when we get right of the curve, there's actually like a response that happens. Like the first thing that happens is we get like auditory exclusion. We start not able to hear sounds around us. We start getting tunnel vision where we're just focused in on one thing.
yeah,
We get this like this whole kind of um, our cognitive processing starts to deteriorate. So we can't really pull from our short term or long term memory. And in reverse, we can't add to our short term or long term memory. In
mhm,
fact, they're doing some studies right now at FDNY where they're taking people directly after they've been in high stress situations, fires, then interviewing them, being like,
yeah,
"Hey, so when did you hear this radio
yeah,
communication? When did you hear this?" And it's amazing to see kind of the differences in people's
yep,
perceptions of how and when things happen and it's real for them, right? Like that's the perception, and that's how our brain implants it, and that's how sometimes our brains are such we're really bad historians of high stress situations
Yeah.
because of this. And
Especially immediately after the fact.
yeah,
And
especially,
a
yeah,
lot of times, cops who have been involved in shootings will
hmm,
go through multiple interviews over
yeah,
weeks because in the moment they will remember something.
right,
A week later, they'll remember more. 2 weeks
right.
later, they might remember more. And it's not that they're lying or trying to hide
No, no,
things.
no,
Their brain has literally blocked snapshots of
right.
that incident out, and it takes time if they even ever come back. But for the
Mhm.
most part, it takes time for that stuff to resurface to where they
Yeah.
can recall what they did.
Oh,
you know
totally.
and nobody really, I don't know, nobody understands that.
It's
And
tough,
yeah, it's
right?
it's tough. Yeah.
Um, some other things we start losing, like motor skills, that kind of stuff. But one example that I like to think about, and I feel horrible for this lady, and I don't know the whole story, so I'm only speaking from what I know. Is there is that female officer, and I can't remember where it was at, but she felt threatened, and she meant to grab her taser,
Hmm.
and she actually grabbed her sidearm
Hmm.
and fired and shot and killed the guy.
Yeah.
And when I think about that situation, and again, I don't know all the details, I don't know, but it makes me think about this kind of stuff, right? Where it was
Yeah.
like she was in a high stress situation. The stress of the situation could have overwhelmed her ability to
Hmm.
fully process, be able to process clearly, and so she reverted back to training. So there is this story of I can't remember what I want to say it was Detroit, and this was a long time ago when officers carried six shooters, revolvers.
Hmm.
um, there was like an ammunition shortage or budget shortage or something. So when they'd go to the range, they'd shoot twice, empty the cylinders, put it in their pocket, reload, shoot twice, empty, put in their pocket.
Yeah.
And so they had numerous officer involved shootings and a couple of fatalities. And under investigation, they found unspent rounds in these people's pockets, in these officers' pockets, because what had happened was they were in such a high stress situation. The only thing they could remember how to do was muscle memory.
Yeah.
And what had they been training? Shoot twice, empty, shoot twice, empty.
Yep.
And so whether that led to the outcome or not, who knows? I'm sure it
Yeah.
didn't help the situation. But then you think about this lady, how many times in a high stress situation did she practice pulling? Was she ever in a training environment where it was okay, pull your taser,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
But probably a lot of time on the range,
Hmm.
and so it was, it kind of understanding this stuff can
Yeah.
help us think about these things maybe a little bit differently
Yeah.
and
No, it
see
for
them
sure
through a different
does.
light.
It for sure
It
does.
and that kind of like it's like, what does this have to do with breathing? What this has to do with breathing is kind of this is directly related to our heart rate,
Yeah.
right? So as our heart rate goes out, these kind of things happen, and that's the response of our autonomic nervous system. Um, our breathing is kind of our only one of our only keys to okay. One of our only like keys or kind of abilities to kind of access our autonomic nervous system.
Hmm.
And so, by using proper breathing mechanics and using some breathing techniques, we can use that to lower our heart rate,
Keep us out of that danger zone,
keep us
so
out
to
of that
speak.
danger zone,
Yeah.
right? And so, when I talk to some of our medics, I talk about like, you know, showing up at a 6 versus showing up at an 8 on the whole like stress scale, and then dealing with stressful call, and being able to lower our heart rate 15 beats
Hmm.
could be the difference between making a proper drug dose calculation and making an improper drug dose calculation,
Yeah.
and that could make a giant impact on patient outcomes. So understanding that, when we start getting stressed, recognize, you know, when are we getting right of the curve? When are we getting stressed? How are we getting stressed? Like, what are our cues? Um, and then like recognizing that, and then how do we bring ourselves back down? Like, what are our things to bring us back down?
In your experience since you've been doing this, how receptive have other agencies, your fellow coworkers, like good reception, bad reception? And
So
I know, and I understand, I understand the culture.
yeah,
So I feel like there would be two responses. You would have a public response, which is usually the I'm going to pound my chest and this is fucking stupid kind of thing.
yeah,
There's then the one-on-one private response behind closed doors or in a text message or something
mhm,
where, hey, this is good shit. we need to be doing, like, what has the reception been that you've experienced or that you've observed maybe in other agencies,
You know,
not just yours?
I've experienced both of those.
Hmm.
I've done this for my department a few times, and the responses I've gotten from my department
Hmm.
have been both. I've had some people be like, I got this shit down, man. I mean, I breathe. I'm so good at breathing. I do it in my sleep. It's like, cool, man. Like, yeah, it's like, good for you. All right, fine.
Okay.
But then I've had the other end of it too, where it was like, this is really important stuff. We need to dive into this more. We need to talk about this more. It's just,
Yeah.
you're not going to reach the people that don't want to be reached,
Yeah.
and it's like, one of the things I do in my department too is I'm involved with developing and presenting resiliency training.
Hmm.
And it's the same thing with that too, right? People don't want to talk about these things. They feel like they're a little woo woo, or they feel like they're this, or they feel like they're that,
Yeah.
and they feel like they don't need it. And usually the people that feel like they don't need it are the
Need it.
ones that need it the
They need it the
most.
most. Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
it's the same with this. I've had, like, I've had all the responses,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and which is okay with me. Like, I know going into it that I'm going to get all the responses,
Yeah.
and the people that don't want it, cool, man. Like, one day when you want it, you know where to find me.
Yeah.
And the people that do want it, I want to invest in those people. And the other thing is for me is it's not just about talking about it. It's about, look at what I do, and look at how I perform,
Hmm.
and that kind of stuff, and then be a model behavior when it comes to that.
Yeah.
And so it's like, hey, if you want to perform at a certain level, this is one of the things that I do, and this is,
Yeah.
and so trying to just model it the best I can, and keep the conversation going. And then what I also try to do is, in some of the trainings that I put together, I'll just sink in little, like, hidden little subliminal seeds, where it talks about, stress reduction. Well, what's one of the things? Oh, well, there's breath work. And then it,
Yeah.
like, just putting it here, putting it there. So eventually when you see it enough times, when it's like, hey, we're going to talk about breath work, it's like, oh, I've seen that a bunch. So, okay, let's
Yeah.
talk
We've
about it.
been somewhat discussing this now for
Yeah,
multiple trainings. Like,
exactly.
yeah,
We've been talking about it for a couple years now, but you
they're
just
not
haven't noticed it.
they're not surprised when
Yeah,
it gets, brought up in a more formal way in a
exactly.
in a longer extended training.
And honestly, I think a lot of places are getting more open to this concept, and open to talking about it.
Hmm.
It's Some people still view it as being a little bit woo woo and a little bit hippie, and everything else. But I do think Belisa, with her book Breathing for Warriors, like
Hmm.
this kind of gives a different spin on it, because when she first started doing this, like, she thought it was going to be a bunch of, like, yoga instructors, that kind of stuff, that were going to be the people that wanted it. What she found out, it was special forces units, SWAT teams.
Hmm.
Then it was, she really wanted to work with the fight community, so it does a lot with, like, the MMA community, that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
Like, folks use this. Folks at high levels use breathing techniques
Yeah.
for calming techniques, for all these things. And we haven't even talked about the breathing techniques yet.
Well, yeah,
Yeah,
I
I know.
know,
I
I
mean, we've
know.
been going on here, but
We keep going on. I mean, we got all day. Well, I do. I don't know if
I,
you do, but
I don't got anything
one
on.
thing I am curious about, and it's just for me personally, because I've never been inside of a fire truck on my way to a call. I can only speak to what it's like being in a patrol car uh, on my way to a call, and I, I think they're two very different environments.
Mhm.
And being in a patrol car, especially when you're new and maybe you're running code to a call, and you can immediately hear the stress in
Yeah.
someone's voice.
Yep.
You can tell when they're taking short, shallow breaths,
Yep.
because when they key that mic up and they go to talk,
Mhm.
the voice
They're
is
getting 2 3 word sentences out.
2 3 word
Yep.
sentences. The voice is faint,
Elevated.
it's
Yeah.
labored, it's
Yeah.
elevated, and you
Yep.
can almost hear them not being able to think clearly or think, I don't want to say not think rationally, but you can hear their thought processes in four-wheel drive, and
Mhm.
it's struggling,
Yep.
and I'm not going to say I haven't been there. I've
Mhm.
100% been there,
Sure.
on my way to
We,
calls.
we've all been new. We've all had
We've
that
all
first
been
time. Yeah.
new.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And one thing that, as I got more experience, uh, before I got on that damn radio, I would take a beat
Hmm.
and just some deep breaths
Yep.
because I didn't want to sound, even if in my brain I may have been like going a million miles an hour, I didn't want to sound like that on the air.
Right.
And I think as a result of that, maybe that paranoia of not wanting to sound stupid, it actually forced me to then physically take
Hmm.
some deep breaths to try to calm myself down. And 9 times out of 10, it would always work.
Yeah.
Whether I was taking those breaths, the right way through the belly,
Right.
at least I could tell that if I just took a moment, took a beat, took a second, took some deep breaths, and then I could talk. I could think better. I could perform better. I
Yeah.
could drive better. What goes on inside of the fire truck when you guys are on your end of maybe that same call? Maybe it's a
Mhm.
collision that police and fire are going to. Are you guys talking? Is it quiet? Are people doing breathing techniques maybe on
Mhm.
their own? I know everyone has a job to do
Yeah.
inside the
Yeah.
engine, but I would hope that on some level, everyone is mentally preparing themselves, either through breathing or through some whatever form of, minuscule meditation you can get
Hmm.
in the 6 minutes it takes you to get to that call. Like what's going on inside those
Yeah.
engines?
So really quick before I answer that question, I want to hit on something that you kind of hit on here is this isn't new, right? Like
Hmm.
using breathing is not new. And here's the kicker: we all do it subconsciously. Like you were saying, you've never taken a breathing class in your life, and you
Yeah.
know to take a breath before because you know that calms you down, right?
Yeah.
Like we know this stuff subconsciously. Sometimes we just need to formalize it,
Yep.
to really understand it. But this is all stuff that we all know, and so it's just a matter of like how do we do it better and how do we do it more conscious,
Yeah.
like make conscious effort. But like what's going on inside the fire truck is usually just gangster rap and like
Perfect.
no
Yeah.
no
I
no
said put the chronic on. God
right
damn it. I knew it.
yep
I knew you
yep
guys listened to gangster
yep
rap.
nonstop. No, we all have a role responsibility, right? So we run 3-person engine company, so if we're running to that same call, kind of the expectation is the driver is focusing on getting us there in one piece.
Yeah.
My firefighter in the back is he or she is what we call like the hydrant finder, or they have the map, so they're making sure that they know where we're going. The driver's driving us there. The firefighter in the back is making sure that they got the directions down so we know where we're going. And me as the officer, I have a computer screen in front of me and I'm looking at the details of the call, and then I'm relaying that to the group.
Okay.
So I'm reading through. So we all have our own individual roles and responsibilities. But as this ramps up, there's times where I've told everybody, hey, this looks like this. So hey, everybody take a breath, you know what you're doing, and then I'll reiterate what we're doing. It's like when we get
Yeah.
there, I need you to do this, I need you to do that. And so that when we get there, we're all on the same page, we're all as calm as we can when we walk out of that thing.
You hope that you're
Yeah,
gotten yourself as low
exactly.
as low as possible from the
Yep.
time you get toned out,
Yep.
and then knowing it's going to ramp back up again.
Yeah, exactly. It's
Yeah.
it's always that thing. Like I want to be there at a 4 and not, if it's high stress, it's going to be an 8 out of 10 on the stress scale of the call.
Hmm.
I want to show up at a 4
Yeah.
because I need a certain amount of, like a certain amount of that stress is good, right? Like it gets you in the moment, it gets
Yeah.
you're ready, you're getting ready to
It
perform.
does. It keeps you
Yep,
focused. It
keeps you
keeps you sharp.
focused. So you need to be there.
Yeah.
But I don't want to be too much.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's going to be too easy to get right of that curve, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like make some mistakes. And I actually have it. Want to do story time for a minute? I have an example of a time when I went right of the curve, and it was one of these things where I was working the truck at our headquarters station, and we got toned out to a welfare check, which is a nothing call, right? And
Hmm.
and typically we don't go to those anymore, but law enforcement specifically requested us to go with them for this welfare check. So we're like, well, this could be something, so we'll just roll.
Hmm.
And so we roll out there, and you know, as I'm reading through the notes, it was a lady who had left. She had checked herself out of a retirement home. Um, Nobody'd seen her in a week, so nobody kind of knew. This was family saying, "Hey, we haven't seen mom," and whatever. So we show up with law enforcement and look around, look through the front windows, and so again, nothing call, right? Like we're talking about a 1 to 2 on the stress scale.
Hmm.
Um, so look in the front window, see a couple of legs in the hallway, somebody laying in the hallway. Now we have somebody down, nobody's answering the door. This kind of ramps it up a little bit,
Yeah.
right? Hasn't been seen in a week. And so I told my firefighters to get all of our stuff, put it at the front door. It's locked, but it's like just have our AED, our kits, everything ready just in case, And I saw law enforcement go around the back, so I was like, I'm going to go with law enforcement. Go around the back with law enforcement. One of the officers was trying to use the Halligan to force the door. It was like, just give me
They
that,
don't
man.
know what they're doing.
Well, I put my boot through it. She's trying to force it, so I just kick
Alligators
it.
are so stupid.
Yeah. I just put my boot through it. I was like,
They never work.
That's how you do it. Anyway, so we go through that door. So now we have to force entry, right? And so then we come to the man door between the garage and the house. It's locked. That one I'm not going to put my boot through as easy. So I grabbed a Halligan from the officer and force that one. So now we force another door.
Mhm.
So I forced 2 doors on my way into this house. So the stress level's starting to ramp up a little bit.
Yeah.
And in all honesty, not to be like crude or anything, I was just expecting at this point they were just going to confirm death. Like
Yeah.
hasn't been seen in a week. As I get closer, I hear snoring respirations. I'm like, oh, we have a viable patient here. So of course I unlock the front door to let my other firefighters in. I call, I have to upgrade to get us a medic unit because she's unconscious at this point. So now this is starting to ramp up.
Yeah.
We have to move her away from the wall. There's no other way about it. And probably in doing so, she was probably just on that verge.
Mhm.
And so as we pull her away, we lose her heart rate, everything. So now we have to upgrade to a full CPR package. So now we're in full CPR on this patient.
What are we talking time frame wise here?
We're talking a matter
From the
of
time you get on scene until now you're starting chest compressions.
5 minutes, if that.
So
Like,
you show up and
yeah.
you're probably at a 1
Yeah.
because you did, not you, but probably
Right.
every cop that was there and firefighter was like, this is just a big nothing burger.
Mhm.
To now,
Now it's everything, right?
5 minutes later,
Yeah.
you've now got someone who's essentially coded on you
Yep.
and you're trying to bring them back.
Yep, exactly. And so, I mean, you want to talk about the stress level going way up.
Yeah.
And as the officer, I'm directing my folks, trying to direct radio communication to get us the resources we need. And because there's only 3 of us, I'm part of the CPR package as well.
Mhm.
So like I'm hands-on and doing all this stuff as other stuff as well.
So not only mentally do you go from,
Yeah.
0 to 100, but now physically, because chest compressions are not easy.
Right.
It's ridiculously taxing.
Right.
And now physically.
Yeah. So we have the whole 9 yards going on, right? And so one of the things that we have to do with our AEDs is we have to talk to our AED. Now I'm working on a unit that I don't normally work with, a crew I don't normally work with. And what I mean by talk to our AED is it's like, this is Chris on engine, blah, blah, blah. And we have an unwitnessed card. There's certain things that it wants me to say to it.
Yeah.
I could not remember what rig I was working on. Like, I was just like, and right in that moment, I was like, I'm right of the curve. Like
Yeah.
the stress level has gotten. So I actually chuckled to myself. You could probably hear it on the audio recording
Mhm.
where I give myself a little chuckle and I'm like, okay, just take a deep breath. I take my big deep breath. I get
Yeah.
my long, nice exhale out, finish what I'm doing. And we go on to do our thing. We end up getting pulses back and we get her to the hospital.
Yeah.
So we had a good outcome on that, but it was one of those things that in that moment I caught myself.
Yeah.
I was starting to get right of the curve and I used my breathing techniques that I have to pull myself back.
Yeah.
That I could be a functioning member of the team.
Yeah.
That I wasn't so right of the curve that I was just ineffective.
Yeah.
So, that's just kind of an example of how the stress can ramp up
Yep.
and how we can use a breathing technique to ramp ourselves back down in the moment.
But think how important it is. Like, my assumption would be, had you not been practicing this stuff and as cognizant of it and, all that stuff, you may not have recognized that you had crossed that threshold into the red.
Right.
And you could have froze up even longer.
Right.
Someone else may have been like, just give it to me, let me, or what,
Yeah.
anything could have happened.
And I've seen that. I've seen people
Yeah.
freeze to the point where it's like, you need to take a time out. Like, go take a
Yep.
time out really quick.
Yeah.
You're not doing anybody any good right now.
So that's why
Yeah.
all this stuff is good to not just do once and then shelf it and
Right.
forget about it. These are the kinds of things that we need to do frequently,
Yeah,
consistent, even if it's once a week,
Right.
once every 2 weeks. At least it's in your brain
Yeah.
on a consistent basis.
Consistency is key. Like honestly, the best thing would be, I mean, if you made a breathing practice, something you did 2 to 3 times a week,
Mhm.
you would be a super efficient breather and you'd be able to utilize that and call that not just in the physical times, but also in the mental times times too, when
Mhm.
the stress is, when the psychological stress is high.
Yeah.
And that's not just for the first responder. That's for the mom trying to run around 3 kids and the stress levels through the roof. And
Yeah.
like, it's for everybody.
I
And
This is literally something that I do when I'm racing, especially, with my off-road stuff because
Mhm.
I haven't been at it very long and I make mistakes often. I crash here and
Mhm.
there and I find myself first of all, I'm really hard on myself because I just
Right.
expect everything that I accomplished in road racing to
Right.
just transfer to dirt bikes, and it 100% does not.
Right.
Most of the shit that you do on a road bike, you don't do on a dirt bike, you know. So
Yeah.
I find myself getting frustrated, and if I'm making excessive mistakes that's costing me time, or
Mhm.
if I crash, it's whatever's going on during that race, uh, I will roll off the throttle, slow down, and I will literally talk to myself
Mhm.
out loud in my helmet, relax. And I will
Yeah.
just say to myself over and over, relax,
Mhm.
relax, stop making mistakes,
Right.
and I feel like when I just say that to myself, I take those deep breaths while I'm going, I can still continue making progress through the race, but it's a good way for me to clear my head, to kind of refocus. And
Mhm.
it pulls me back from the wrong side of that
Yep.
bell curve, which is so easy to get to.
Super
And
easy.
it's a fucking race. It means
Right.
nothing,
Right.
it's
Right.
not life or death. It's not important. But in that moment, I'm not achieving my goals, which
Mhm.
is to ride the best that I can. And in order for me to be as good as I can, I got to get out of the red. I got
Yeah.
to pull myself back.
Yeah. And
It,
one thing that I listened to Belisa talk about was having a little mantra, and
mhm.
just using it with your breath. And one that she used was "I have time," and just being like, I'm gonna take a big inhale and I'm gonna go I, and then
Mhm.
have, and then
Yeah.
finish with time. That took me less than 10 seconds.
Yeah.
And just doing that right here, I felt myself go, not that I've been stressed at all, but I could
Yeah.
feel it in myself. And
Well, I mean, what no one knows right now is I have a gun pointed at Chris and I'm forcing him to do this interview. So
yeah,
you're
there is
doing
that.
very well considering your circumstances. I'm just
Help.
kidding. For the record, there are no guns pointed at Chris. And I don't want to throw rocks at cop cars. Oh, geez. But yeah, no, that stuff it is important, and it
Mhm.
especially in your job and my girlfriend's job and my police friends' jobs, where if you get on the wrong side of that curve, that could be that amount of time that it takes you to pull yourself back could be the difference between somebody living and
Yep,
somebody dying. So if
100%.
you can prevent yourself from even getting there, or
Right.
if you can recognize it soon enough, you can
Mhm.
stop it before you get to that point of no return.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So
And then that's the whole point, right? Like,
yeah.
especially when you're in those like public service arenas, like and it's not just public service arenas, it's any arena really, but
Yeah.
it's like when you have high stress, high stakes positions, it is so important to manage our stress in real time
Yeah.
and have the tools to manage that in real time. Yeah.
Let's talk about breathing techniques.
Yeah, let's talk about breathing techniques.
Breathing, because there are
So
many different breathing
there's a
techniques.
lot of breathing
Yeah.
techniques, and I'll talk about a few here, and I'll talk about some that these are just easy ones that we can do, right? And Huberman had a podcast where he actually they went and they took a look at a bunch of different breathing techniques and looked at which ones had the greatest stress reduction.
That's Andrew
Andrew
Huberman.
Huberman,
Yeah, his
and Huberman
podcasts are
Live.
actually great.
Yeah,
A
his
lot of
podcasts are great.
good information that you
Yep.
can get from those
Yeah,
podcasts.
I really like Huberman and his podcast, and I really enjoyed the one on breathing. It
Mhm.
was
I listened to that one too.
yeah,
That was good.
yeah, and not just because I'm kind of a breathing nerd with all this, but because like it was just a really good podcast.
Mhm.
And the one that he said, during their studies and the research they did, the one that actually has been shown to reduce the stress the most is called a physiological sigh. And so what these are kind of breathing patterns that we can use to help lower our heart rate, to help reduce stress, that kind of stuff. And a physiological can't even say it. A physiological sigh. It's that gun pointed at me. It's making me nervous. Just kidding. No gun.
I love these buttons.
It's pretty good, man. I like
Thanks.
that.
I'll send you the link. You can get the same board.
Sweet. So the physiological sigh, how this goes is this is a one full quick inhale. So it's a real fast inhale with almost a kind of a smaller second inhale. So it's adding to it. Then with a long, deliberate exhale. And with that exhale, you can do that through pursed lips, just kind of or however you're going to do it, but you're going to get benefit regardless.
Okay.
But doing that a few times, like just
Okay.
give it a couple times, and you can actually feel your body start to kind of just come down a little bit. And again, our goal is to use that good diaphragmatic breath,
Which I did not do, by the way, because
that's why I mentioned it.
Because I'm a C student.
And that's why I mentioned it.
I would have lost my recess over that one. All right, let me try it again. Man, you really feel your core working.
Yeah, you feel your core working when you're
Yeah.
doing a good
Yeah.
when you're working through the exercise, and that's a whole nother
Mm-hmm.
it's hard in this format to talk about the exercises and that. If you check out Breathing for Warriors, it has a lot of the breathing exercises, but you're gonna get a sweat on. It's gonna
Yeah.
be a workout.
Yeah, for sure. All right, what's another one?
So that's a physiological sigh. The next one that we've probably all heard is called box breathing. I think everybody's heard some form of box breathing. Not everybody, but it's a real common one. And this is kind of just how it sounds. It's breathing in kind of the shape of a box. And what I mean by that is it's what we're going to do is we're going to do a 4-second inhale, 4-second hold, a 4-second exhale, a 4-second hold.
Okay.
And so again, using good diaphragmatic breathing, good belly breaths, good horizontal breathing. And I like to use this one. This is one I use for a couple different reasons. I like to use this at the end of a workout. One, it helps with some active recovery, but I'll set a timer for 5 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll try to. And the keyword is try. Sometimes it's hard to do this patterns for a full 5 minutes, and you get better at it. Um, but one thing with box breathing is it's actually, and Huberman talks about this a little bit too, is it's a way to increase CO2 tolerance. So I don't really talk a lot about how do we do breath holds and and that kind of stuff. But one of the reasons why some people struggle with breath holding is because we have low CO2 tolerance. And so as that CO2 builds up in our bloodstream, our body's like, I want to get rid of this shit. And so other people, they have super high tolerance and they can hold their breath for long periods of time. And it's interesting because it's not really a sign of how fit somebody is. It's just how tolerant you are. And so
Gotcha.
you can actually build your CO2 tolerance. And this is actually a breathing technique that you can actually use to help build CO2 tolerance. And so what I do is I'll do the 4-4-4.
Mm-hmm.
And when I can do that for 5 minutes straight, I bump it up to 5-5-5. And then when I can do that for 5 minutes straight, and this is an all in one sitting, it'll be like
Yeah.
yesterday I did it, so today I'm bumping up to fives.
Mm-hmm.
I did fives yesterday and I made it for 5 minutes. I'm going to do six.
Gotcha.
And so just slowly increasing that threshold.
And you're keeping the same 4 count.
Yep.
Each
Or
time.
not the
Do you
4
increase the 4 count?
Well, I'll increase it. So rather than fours, if I can do 5 minutes at the 4 count,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to bump it up to 5 minutes at a 5 count.
Okay.
And it doesn't have to be 5 minutes. That's just what I like to do as part of like an active recovery.
Yeah.
But this is something that if you're just sitting there, you can practice box breathing.
You can do it in your cube at work.
You can do it in your cubicle at work. You can
Yeah.
do it in the fire truck. You can do it in the patrol car. You can do it.
You do it
picking
wherever.
up your kids from soccer. You can do
Yeah.
it whatever it is. You can do box breathing. And it's
Mhm.
just again a 4-second inhale, 4-second hold, 4-second exhale, 4-second hold, and repeat.
Okay.
And if you got 2 minutes, do it for 2 minutes. If you got 1 minute, do it for a minute. Just
Yeah.
it's a great way to lower stress and work on some of those.
And again, it's
things.
important. I feel like it's important if you're doing this. Maybe if you want to set a timer for a total time,
Mhm.
that's cool.
Yeah.
But don't just like be dicking around on your phone.
Yeah,
Because you can
exactly.
literally kill 2 birds with one stone and use this as a form of meditation as well. Like
100%.
it
And
fits right
that's
in that
Yep, and
category.
that's what I do with this too. Is I use this as part of my meditation because this is what I use to pull my mind away from all the garbage that's up there.
Mhm.
Right? Is I'll use the 4 count. I'll use the focusing on diaphragmatic breathing. To pull myself out of my thoughts.
Yeah.
And kind of into that present moment. Another one that I really like is similar. It's called tactical or pace breathing. And what this is it's a 4-second inhale, a 4-second hold, a 6-second exhale with a 2-second hold. And I really like things with a long exhale as
Mhm.
far as like stress reduction and yeah, just kind of stress reduction, that kind of stuff. It does a couple of things. So a couple of things happen when we do long deliberate exhales is we actually create a tiny bit more space around that pleural cavity in our heart. So there's actually becomes a little bit more space for our heart to kind of expand into,
Mhm.
which is going to naturally lower. And it's minuscule, right? We're not talking
Yeah.
big, but it's enough.
Yeah.
The other thing is we're going to start to stimulate our phrenic nerve and our vagus nerve, and those help regulate heart rate and blood pressure. You've if you've ever heard of anybody that has basal vagal,
I haven't heard of that.
so it's a term like we see it a lot where people will be bearing down. Sometimes elderly people in the bathroom they'll be bearing down super hard, and
Okay.
they kind of stimulate that vagus nerve. Their blood pressure drops and they pass out.
Oh, okay.
So
Gotcha.
long exhales are another way to stimulate the vagus nerve, not to the point where you're going to pass
Yeah.
out. Like
Yeah,
but
yeah.
it'll help lower that heart rate, help lower that blood pressure. And so it's one thing if you don't remember anything else, just remember a nice long exhale. That's one of the
Are there
things.
things from a safety precaution standpoint that people should, like obviously you said the potential might be there to pass
Yeah,
out. Like
yeah.
if you feel
So
yourself getting lightheaded,
yeah, that's
you know,
one thing, and a lot of people when they start doing breathing techniques and stuff, it's we're not used to it, right? So we're going to be breathing a lot more,
yeah.
or maybe a lot less than what we're used to, and so you are going to feel lightheaded, you are going to feel tingly. So like, don't do this when you're driving, like, and
Yeah.
unless it's like one of those things where it's like, okay, I'm getting stressed, I need a second. So you do a big like physiological sigh,
Yeah.
like you're not going to pass out from one physiological sigh.
Yeah.
But you just don't want to get yourself in a position where you start feeling lightheaded and you're operating heavy machinery or whatever it
Right.
is,
Yeah. I would say if you feel
Yeah.
lightheaded, maybe
Yeah.
give it a couple
Give it a
minutes.
little bit
Yeah.
for sure.
Or not be as extreme with it right out of the gate.
Yeah.
Find out what you can tolerate. And again, I am not a medical professional. I am not a doctor.
Right.
If you feel like you need to consult a physician, by all means do that. And that absolve me of any liability and or the Jake Brown podcast. So, like, let's just use some common sense, people. If you feel yourself starting to, the lights getting
Yep.
fainter,
Yep. That
just
vision's getting a little
yeah,
narrower.
just chill out. Maybe you're a
Take
little
a
too
second.
hard out of the gate.
Yeah.
Just breathe how
Exactly.
you normally would breathe, and then resume once you feel like you
Exactly.
can resume it again.
Exactly.
All right, now that we got the
Now that we
liability
got-
part out of the way.
yeah.
Are there more techniques? Other
There's a
techniques?
lot more. I mean, there's all different kinds of techniques out there, and
Those are the
you can
main
find
ones.
those are the ones that I like. Those are kind of the main ones.
Mhm.
There's one for sleep called the 4-7-8 method.
What is that one? Because I sleep like hot garbage.
Oh, me too, man. And I haven't had any luck with this 4-7-8 one, but it's one that they talk about.
Got it. Don't use the 4-7-8.
Hey, it's one that's out there. And that's just a 4-second inhale, a 7-second pause,
Okay.
and an 8-second exhale. And again, the pause and then the exhale, that's just that extended exhale, right? So it's going to lower our heart rate. And the whole idea is it's going to calm us down.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
And so yeah, that's really all I got for you as far as the breathing techniques. There's more if you wanted to. This is one of those things that to really dive into it, it's almost like a trainer client based stuff, right? Like
Yeah, we're not trying to give the whole class away.
no, but I do recommend like if this has been intriguing, if you've kind of perked your interest in something like that, I really highly recommend the Breathing for Warriors book by Belisa Vranich. I think it's great. It's got a lot of the breathing techniques in there. It's also got a lot of the breathing exercises,
Yeah.
and there's also a lot of like breathing for sport in here. Like as I
Gotcha.
just flip open this book, it's Fight Club, right? Like breathing in quadrants. So like how can we get breath in different quadrants and this is mainly for like jujitsu practitioners or that kind of stuff. But
one thing, and I wrestled as a kid,
Mhm.
like growing up, like through my freshman year of high school, and I hated it. Like I hated every second of it. It was just I hated having someone on me
right,
that I felt like I couldn't breathe.
yeah,
And I could never
Yep.
I could never shake that feeling.
right,
And it's part of the reason why I've never really been interested in jujitsu.
Mhm.
I've done a little bit of jujitsu, but overall, it's like it just fucking triggers PTSD in me,
Right.
and I'm like, nope.
Well, and a lot of that too is because we're used to being these chest breathers, right?
Exactly.
And so when we have somebody like in side control, so if I got somebody smashing me in side control,
Yep.
they're really inhibiting me to breathe with my chest,
With your
like,
chest,
it-
but that which is how we want to breathe. Well, it's
if we
how
don't know, it's
how
how we've kind of taught ourselves.
yeah, it's
to
how
breathe.
we think we want to breathe.
But now that I've actually been practicing this and doing this, I don't mind being in side control. I can breathe into my abdomen. I can breathe into like my back. There's positions where I
Exactly.
can back breathe where it's not comfortable.
Yeah.
But a couple of things. One, I know how to work my way out of it, right? So I can calm down,
That's
and I can put
huge.
my breath into the spots where the person isn't. So
Exactly.
so I can still get the breath that I need,
Yeah.
and be in these highly uncomfortable positions.
Yeah.
Um,
Which is all of what jujitsu is.
right,
in
and the
one
goal is just
long,
to not
uncomfortable
get
position.
into side control. Like sometimes you look at a dude and you'll be like, "Nope, I'm
Nope.
staying top this whole time.
Not today.
Not letting him on top.
Not today.
Not happening."
Oh, geez. Yeah, I'll stick to boxing. Boxing and motorcycles is good for me.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough.
I know that I don't think, do you have a, I guess, breathing related Instagram, or you just have your personal Instagram?
Yeah, I just have my personal, but I'm in the process of putting that together.
Okay.
There's a
We
couple
won't
of things.
Well, I've already kind of given out your.
That's fine. Totally fine.
So where, if people have questions or they want to reach out or they want to schedule you to come and talk to a group, how can people get a hold of
go
you?
to my Instagram, DM me through my Instagram. That's going to be the best way to do it.
Which is
Oli Barney.
all right.
Or at Oli Barney.
At Oli Barney.
I don't know what the kids say these days.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, not much. They're too busy on their phones.
Right? I don't know. Text them, find out. No, that's the best way to get hold of me. And I am in the process of putting something together. I've just been lazy, for lack of better words.
Yeah. You got a podcast or anything?
Going to be starting one of those too.
Good.
Shortly. I in the process of putting all this stuff together right now, and so
you can see my Mickey Mouse operation here, but
hey, this is perfect.
It works.
This is what I need. So
you don't need much. You just need the passion for whatever it is you want to talk about.
Right.
Mine just happens to be kind of health and fitness.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. We'll cross over a lot on some of that, so I'll definitely have you on once we once I get that up and running.
No, I'd love to.
So
I'd definitely love to.
Yeah, I know my podcast. We're going to talk. I think I came up with a little name for it. Mandy actually was the one that kind of gave me the push to do it.
Okay.
And it was going to be the PAR podcast. It's going to be like a personal accountability report. So it's going to
all right.
gear towards the first responder community, but it's really going to focus a lot on physical and mental health.
Perfect.
Is kind of the goal.
Perfect.
So
perfect.
Yep, that's going to be it.
Well, for all you stoners out there, you now know how to take longer, more fulfilling bong rips. And with that, that is this week's episode of the Jake Brown Podcast. Again, you can find all these episodes on Spotify, iTunes, Amazon Music, YouTube, and X/Twitter. We'll be back next week. I don't know what I'm going to talk about, but it's going to be something probably motorcycle related. If you didn't watch MotoGP this morning, the sprint race, what the fuck? Unreal race, and not necessarily in a good way. So hopefully tomorrow's main race will be better, but I'm 100% going to be talking about Perez and all the fucking bullshit that went down this morning. So I'll talk to you all later. I still don't know how to end these damn things. That's the hardest part.
Perfect.
I know.
Bye.
Bye, I guess.
Until next week.
See you later. Except I don't use cameras yet.